Hi, I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast.
The podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. The Practical Guitarist Podcast is brought to you by Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Great Lakes Guitar Pickups provides fantasy tones at prices a practical guitarist will love. Featuring top-notch construction, attention to detail, and a fully custom product, if you can dream it, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups can probably build it. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Are you a regular listener? Why not? David here reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Review us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/practicalguitarist or on Twitter as @practguitarist. Support the show. Merchandise is available in our Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And donate to us via Patreon, available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. Reach out to us directly via email at questions@practicalguitarist.com. Hello, Jim.
Ooh, hi, I'm Jim.
The voice you are now hearing is Satan. No,
It's the past.
It's David.
The future.
And I'm not possessed, I promise. But this is going to be our first Halloween episode. Even though we were around last Halloween, we didn't do one.
We didn't really think of Halloween as being a thing.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of scary shit that's going on in the guitar world in the last couple of days, and I think it's worth mentioning. So tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the Jimmy Page Telecaster, and that's just been announced from Fender, kind of leaked sort of thing. I don't know if you consider it a leak. They had a video that kind of featured like Jimmy Page, and it was pretty obvious what they were doing.
Somebody from Fender may have taken a leak.
That may have been the case. And then we also have the boutique world, which is according to some people starting to collapse.
Yeah.
So, but we have a very special and scary ghost story to tell you at first about a specific builder. And I'm going to start, and I'm not going to mention their name at first. I'm going to start, and I want to talk about their history, and then we'll mention their name at the end. And we'll kind of talk more about this whole like shenanigans issue thing. So there's a builder, and I'm sure some of the listeners will know this person. Their exploits are legendary. They started off actually as a small builder sometime, I want to say in like the early 2000s, around 2003. So right when I was graduating high school, and they were a company called Effector 13. And they didn't really have a whole lot of success at it, and they were really having some issues with, just running a business and not understanding how it works. So they sold Effector 13 and its associated designs to another company who ran it for a while under the same name and eventually folded. Okay. So this person decided that they were not going to continue in the pedal business, and they kind of got out of it. Then in 2005, around 2005, the same person that created Effector 13 started a new company called Devi Never Effects. So by this point, you're probably aware of who this you might be aware of who this is. This is Devi Ever, the proprietor of Devi Never Effects. So Devi Ever ran a company producing basically fuzz pedals as the majority of the range, a couple of overdrives. This continued until 2013 when Devi Ever was working on this crazy. Because a lot of her pedals wound up being Nintendo themed and like video game sound effects. She came up with this idea, the console, which would be like, it looked like an Atari, and you would put cartridges into it to get different effects. And it was just kind of a cool, like kitschy thing. She put up a Kickstarter for this, raised $40,000, and then basically said, fuck it, I'm not making it. Took the money and ran. Okay. I would say this was a crowdfunding circus when this happened. The effects world was on meltdown because Devi Ever was at that time probably at the peak of what she was doing. She was extremely popular. She had wait lists for a lot of her products. And she just felt her statement at the time, if I recall, was something to the effect of, "I'm not making enough money at this. I really want to pursue my real passion, which is pixel art and video game design, and so I'm going to fold Devi Ever. Sorry to everybody that I'm walking away." Really, if I recall, was not really a whole lot of statement about the fact that she took everybody's $40,000 and didn't deliver a product. Promptly sold the company to Dwarfcraft Devices, including all the designs therein. Dwarfcraft actually still continues to produce a lot of the original Devi Ever effects. Things like the Hyperion, I think they make. With everyone thought at the time that would be the end of Devi Ever back in 2013 in the gear world, right? Devi Ever had some issues right before the closure of her company with a specific individual. So for those of you that are not anointed, Devi Ever happens to be a trans individual. She had a situation with Billy Corgan, if I recall, who's one of her endorsers, who used her effects, right? They had a conversation. He wanted a very specific type of effect. Devi said she could provide it. She provided it to him, and then promptly took that pedal and made it a Billy Corgan signature model without his approval. Okay. Billy Corgan, when he found out about this, flipped the fuck out, went all over Twitter, Facebook, and other places saying that Devi Ever he had a lot of choice words, some that were involving her gender, and it's a whole thing. It was not very becoming of him. It was more based around the fact that she had misled him about their business relationship and was abusing his name without his knowledge. I think everything that was said there was out of anger and not necessarily to be politically incorrect or anything like that. Fast forward, so her business folds, which may or may not be as a result of some of that fallout. I don't think it was, and we can examine why, because obviously she'd already done this once with the Vector 13, selling it off to another company and then walking away. And so Dwarfcraft took over the pedal line. She disappeared for 2 years, apparently going to do video games and pedal art. Actually, I don't even think it was 2 years. She was back in 2014, I thought. So she came back on the scene in 2015. Wait, I'm looking at this article trying to figure out exactly when she came back. I believe it was in 2015. And when she came back, the crazy thing was she hadn't really had any... Okay, so she went off to do video games, right? No video games came out credited to her. There was no pixel art of hers used in a video game, as far as I know. You can look at her social media accounts, which is like facebook.com/DeviEverFX and twitter.com/FuzzGoddess. I know FuzzGoddess was like the most used one. There was a lot of stuff on her Twitter account years ago. The reason why I have followed this story is because I was interested at the time. Of course, she makes fuzz pedals, right? So I that's how I became aware of them. But I started to follow her because she had controversy following her everywhere, and I didn't understand why. Like the situation with Billy Corgan and others. And oddly enough, she goes into the video game world and she gets wrapped up in Gamergate. Now, for those of you who are not aware of what Gamergate was, it's a whole thing. A lot of people have accused it of being a misogynist plot. I don't know whether it is or not, but I will tell you this much. There was a game called Depression Quest that was made by a young lady, and it got rave reviews, but it was not a very good game according to most people because it was nothing but a web page that you navigated through. And the reason it quote-unquote got rave reviews was allegedly because she had traded sex for good reviews. I'm not saying I know if this story is true or not. I'm just saying this is what was reported. And Devi Ever was in the middle of this controversy, all over her social media, putting people on blast. I believe she was somehow involved with the woman that was responsible for Depression Quest, the game. It's a whole thing. You can read about it if you're interested in that kind of drama. But my point is that this drama followed her into the other world, right? So when she comes back to pedals, I believe it was in 2015, might have been 2016. It's kind of a triumphant return, everybody thought. Problem. Dwarfcraft owns a lot of the designs and pedals that she originally made. So she sues Dwarfcraft, or at least threatens to sue Dwarfcraft, and at least has some pretty serious legal conversations with them about, reacquiring her designs. To my knowledge, she does not. and she continued to make pedals after that under her own label. I forget what the name of the company was that she started right after that. But the point is, she continued to make pedals, and now, as of October 26th or 27th, she has announced that she is leaving the game again, and basically has admitted that I cannot give you your money back. I'm taking your money. This sucks. I hate my life. She blamed a lot of it on issues with her own, personal issues. Obviously, she has some personal situations that could be a problem there. But as a word of warning to our podcast listeners, clearly there is something else going on here, and this has been a problem since 2003 for her. Make a company, sell the company for cash. Make a company, sell the company for cash, and pocket the remaining money that was sitting there, and then basically do the same thing a third time. Fool me once, you know the saying. This is just ridiculous.
Yeah, George Bush said it worst. Because he said something like,
he always said everything
fool
worse.
me once, and he couldn't remember the quote, so he went, fool me once, shame on you, or something like that, and then he went, fool me twice.
Shame on
you know
me.
the saying. Then he went like this, you know the saying, because he couldn't remember the
Yeah.
first one. But anyway.
Well, I was running out of breath. I had to take a big drink right after that.
So yeah, you kind of said that as one big sentence.
I don't know how I got through that whole thing. I was going to read her statement, but I'm not gonna. It's not.
So I want to stay away from that because there's a lot of controversy in it. We don't want to.
Yeah.
We don't want to look like we're taking a side.
We're not talking about the
political.
gender. I want to make this very clear to our listenership. Her gender problems are her gender problems. They have nothing to do with her business. Nothing.
Right. And her personal problems. Right. Just because you are, and that's what we're getting at. We're going to come back to, but we just want you to understand that we're not trying to take a side on that. We're not trying to go one way or the other. The fact is that when you're running a company, you have a bad day, you have a good day, you take a day off, you maybe go see some help. You know what you don't do? You don't drive the company into the ground because you have a bad day.
And you
sure
don't do it 3 times.
No. And so I want to ask you, David, because you would know better than me, because I've never given money to Kickstarter.
Right.
I have thought about it. As a matter of fact, Nita Strauss's new album, I've thought about doing my pre-order through Kickstarter because you get some bonuses.
Yeah,
but,
you're sure.
Yeah, but the point is, and Salt and Pepper, was it Salt and Pepper? Yeah, Salt and Pepper, the 90s or 80s rap band.
Mm-hmm.
They did the same thing. They
Lots of bands have used it. I mean, Jason Sudeikis used it for his last 2 records, I believe.
Yeah. But if it's one thing if you can't complete it with the funds, it's another thing if you get $40,000.
I believe if you don't complete with the funds get returned on Kickstarter, I think.
And that's the thing. So what happens with these funds that don't...
They were completed. She didn't follow through. So she took the money and ran.
Okay, so that's that's out and out thievery.
You can look up if you're interested. You can look up the Console 2 cartridge-based multi-effects guitar pedal. Excuse me.
Sorry, folks. His cat is literally standing on top of his keyboard, like right under his microphone,
and I'm sneezing at the same time.
And he's just sneezing at the cat.
So the console.
It's a spooky cat.
No, it's orange.
Very spooky cat.
Yeah, right.
This is a Halloween episode.
Shit. Console 2 cartridge-based multi-effects guitar pedal, right? You can look that up, and you can find out about that whole mess.
Honestly, as a growing up in the Atari and Nintendo world, I mean, I grew up in my teenage years. It was Pong. Well, I hate to date myself, but there was Pong. There was Atari in my late.
Jim, how old are you?
When I say late teens, I want to say that the Atari 2600 hit the shelves at I was 17 or 18.
What you're trying to say is your kids played the Nintendo.
Yes, and I didn't have kids yet, so it was me. I was very childish. But I had Nintendo and PlayStation 1 and all that. So to me, that sounds, I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard of it, but it sounds like a really cool thing, like a little Nintendo unit. You would pop the cards.
I honestly, when I saw it when it came out originally, I was like, You know what? It's not something that I think I would buy. But at the same time, she was going to license the cartridge technology to other manufacturers as well.
Right.
So the whole idea behind it was like, there were other pedal builders that she was listing with this pedal as like people who are interested in the thing. Let me read off some of the names that had expressed interest in maybe developing cartridges: Three Leaf Audio, Amp Tweaker, Analog Man, Blakemore Effects, Caroline Guitar Company, Dr. Scientist, Dwarfcraft, Earthquaker Devices, Empress, all pretty much a who's who of anybody in the Wampler even.
At that time. Huh?
Yeah, for that time. Because remember, you got to go back. This device was proposed in 2012.
Okay, so there were still, I mean, it's kind of niche in that we had cards that you could stick software on. So this would have had to also have some hardware interfaces.
Actually, this was a multi-pin connector. It was going to be completely analog.
Oh, there you go. So that makes sense.
Yeah, so
it wouldn't make sense to have it and then all of it just be digital.
Yeah, and
card.
actually, if you think about the way that this actually works, it's just controls and connectors for the internet, the ins and outs, and then some. It's nothing more than a breadboard. That's what it is.
Right.
It's a hardware breadboard. I had some issues with the idea of having a console at your feet with these cartridges sticking out of the top on a board. I don't think this was ever aimed at like professional guitar players. This was aimed at hobbyists who like.
I wondered
cool
why
idea.
somebody had said something about take your thing out, blow on it, put it back in. Somebody had referenced that. I wasn't really sure what that was all about, so that must be it. So okay, so some interesting stuff, some funny stuff. I mean, but what it comes down to is this, and this is what I think we're getting at, or at least I'm reading from this is. When you go to a boutique builder, whether it's through Kickstarter, hopefully Kickstarter has some protection or whatever. At least you should protect yourself, because when there's an individual at the other end of this, and it's no secret that Robert Keeley went through some stuff. In the early 2000s, right? It was probably around 2003. Correct. 2002. I know because a friend of mine.
It was a long while. It actually lasted a really long time.
Yeah, a friend of mine had a pedal in the. I want to say
like
Keeley used the mod
there.
Sparkle Effects or something, or Sparkle Drives or something.
Yeah.
But anyway,
anything that was Tube Screamer. I mean, pretty much.
Yeah. So. My buddy had one in the quaffer, so to speak, and it took a lot longer than it would normally take to throw a short mod on there and send it back. I want to say it took almost 2.5 years, 2 years. So now we're not saying like that Robert Keeley's company is a bad company now. It's obviously
no, we're just saying that everybody battles personal demons. Everybody does, and it can affect your business. And
correct.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't point out that, if you go to a Boss, like a Boss pedal or a Boss company, Roland, it's a bigger structure. There's more people in place. There's more checks and balances. There's less likelihood of somebody at the top being an alcoholic or something like that and affecting the business down the chain because they have things in place to protect them. I mean, just basic stuff.
Right. I mean,
when you're dealing with sole proprietorship, I mean, you really don't know. I mean, look, the reason we brought this up, yes, this is a Halloween episode. And frankly, Devi Ever situation and how this happens to people repeatedly in the gear world is a horror story. Devi Ever clearly has a long history of behavior towards her customers that is not acceptable. And yet people still continue to pay this woman for effects. And I know that in 2 years, she will either be back on her own or she will be working with somebody else and people will be buying her stuff again.
Yeah, there's obviously something there. I mean, there has to be. I mean, but I don't know. I'd never heard of it until you mentioned it today. But taking that outside of that.
And there, of course, by the way, Jim, I didn't go over all the controversies. She's had arguments with JHS about ripping her pedals off and her ripping other people's pedals off. And of course, a lot of the designs she's making now are ripoffs of what Dwarfcraft currently makes that she designed originally. So
right. But
it's
they bought
a
those
whole
rights.
fucking thing. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
so now she's copying, essentially.
And the thing is that one would say, well, you can't copy yourself. Well, actually, in a legal sense, you can. And in a legal sense, you can.
I think this is one of those gray areas in terms of morality. But at the same time, I also think that, look, she's breaking the law, and she's playing with your money doing it, which is a problem because if she got sued, none of her assets are protected. It's pretty clear at this point that if she's able to walk away with $40,000 in money from her company, she's not embezzling from her own company. That's pretty clear at this point. Yeah. Because I'm sure somebody was called on that.
And people have gotten in more trouble for less.
So it sure sounds to me, and by the way, with as many blues doctors and or rock doctors and blues lawyers that are out there, I guarantee you they looked into this. Some lawyer was like, man, if I could, I would.
Yeah, but when you take up the
pitchfork,
the pitchforks and stuff. There are issues, as we explained before, and we don't want to touch on them.
Yeah,
reasons that somebody would probably not touch this with a.
And in this case, right? There's the social reasons that would probably
there's social and political issues that really nobody's going to touch this for, especially for so little. Let's say a lawyer took this on. Let's say both. They could get every single.
It would have to be a person
for two. So it would be $80,000 legal fees. The lawyer might walk away with what? $15,000, $20,000 at the most.
Yeah, I mean, it really actually, really, in this case, this would be a small claims court case. I mean, I don't even think it would be like that, but it would just be time and effort involved in it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. There's not enough money in it.
Right,
it wouldn't.
But we're not talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. We're talking about literally going to small claims court and coming out with $250, the money you put in. Well, it's
one thing, like when there was the thing that Verizon did, they wound up having to pay. I remember getting a check for like $2 or $10 in the mail because it was a class action lawsuit. I didn't even know what was going on, but this person took up. But it's because it was worth millions of dollars at $10 a piece.
Correct.
Whatever it was,
correct.
Less their fees. And of course, they automatically took out their fees, and I didn't care. That was $10 I didn't know I had. So, I mean.
So,
but,
the thing is,
So how do you protect yourself, David? How do you protect yourself when it comes to, I don't want to mention the company, but so a Facebook friend of mine was a signature guitarist for a company. And he had pre-ordered his guitar. They kept telling him, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It didn't come. They said he would have something. This was just as recent. It was just last month. It was September. They had no pictures. They had nothing to show him. Nothing. He finally said, that's it. And the way he protected himself in that case was he had used a credit card. He was able to say to the credit card company, look, you need to get your money back.
Right. Well, I mean, I just got burned on eBay. Everybody, you need to understand, whenever you put down money on something that is not made already, you are taking a risk. Unless you're walking into a retail store, putting your money down and getting something in your hand and walking away, you are taking a risk. But understand that 99.999% of the people selling things are trying to be legit. It is the 0.0001% people. Actually, I screwed that math up, but it's this percent of people that are the Devi Evers of the world who are not afraid to take advantage of a situation that they're in. And I would say that the best way that you can protect yourself is first be on the up and up, read about people. Yes, of course, Devi Ever probably seemed fine back when she was doing Effector 13. I believe that was prior to her going into her trans state. She would have mail back then. It has been alleged that some of the money that she, quote unquote, embezzled, if you want to look at it from that perspective, was used for an operation. I don't know if that's the case or not. That may be people running their mouths. The point is that once you look at these people and you kind of evaluate, especially if you're dealing with a sole proprietor, you kind of evaluate what they're doing. You can get a pretty accurate depiction of what's going on. Ask around. Talk to the other people that bought. Did you have a bad experience? Because I'll tell you what, other people were already seeing behaviors from Devi Ever that were questionable.
Well, Billy Corgan's not quite.
I'm not talking about him. You're not going to have a conversation with him in a forum. If you go back and you dig through Gear Page articles and stuff from back then, you will find people saying things like, I waited, 6 months for my pedal. Like, what the hell's the deal here? And, things like that. Or like, I put a deposit down and then I was asked to put more money down, which means you put the deposit down and then your money got spent on something else and she still needs the materials to complete the project.
There was another company that was doing that recently.
There are lots of companies that have done that.
Yeah, it was a guitar or pedal company. They were saying, "Oh yeah, we need some more money. We need some more money," but there was no product.
Yeah, that would be Gear Supply Co.
Was that who it was?
Yeah, Gear Supply Co. did the Kickstarter for their pedal line, and they were paying another company to build the pedals for them, and it was a private builder, and it was just that whole situation was a clusterfuck. It wound up being just as bad as this. And actually, in the forum where they were discussing this, and I kind of got involved in it, it was extremely clear to me that Gear Supply Co. what they did was just as bad, if not worse, than Devi Ever. At least Devi Ever has the emotional instability issues that come into play here. It's pretty clear that there's something wrong in this situation, albeit whatever it is. But in the case of Gear Supply, it was just mismanagement, bad mismanagement.
Yeah.
And promise of product that was not going to exist. Unfortunately, you see this all too often. When I started to see pedal builders going on to Indiegogo and Kickstarter to try and finance their pedals, I quickly realized this is a disaster waiting to happen, because we already know of the horror stories of people putting money down on things. I have pre-ordered and put money down on a couple of devices in my playing career. One of them was a 2-month wait. The other one was a 3-week wait. One of them was done in the course of the show. That was when I bought my Sunface. The other one was my Ethos Overdrive. I did not feel comfortable with either of those situations, even though I know Analog Man's totally reputable. I've never heard of anybody not getting an effect from him on time. And the other thing is, going back so far as, the King of Tone, he will not take a deposit for those things. You get on a wait list, you don't put any money down until it's your time. So, point is, reputable dealers don't require a deposit every single time. If you don't trust this person, and I mean trust this person, I wouldn't give them my money. I'd say, look, best I'm willing to do is a 25% deposit. If you're buying a $200 pedal, $50 up front, okay. If they really need your money to finance the pedal, because I understand, like, some of that deposit money goes into the materials. But realistically, if you're a real business and you're taking care of customers, chances are you probably have the parts, and the parts aren't that expensive. So the pedal company I was referring to, and I don't know if it was Gear Supply Co. because I'm going to step away for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, the person was talking about they needed money, and no, it was a guitar company. And they had built these guitars, or he was building these guitars, and he got on and said, "Hey, I'm behind." He was a YouTuber. Guitar somebody, and he was the one that he started the whole the whole. Tone woods don't mean anything controversy.
I remember that.
That's the guy. Because what happened was he did a similar thing. He had a big breakdown. He was on YouTube. I'm pulling my channel. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to let anybody make comments on my channel. And long story short, he yanked his channel off of YouTube.
I remember that. I don't remember the guy's name. It's Professor or something. I don't remember. Yeah, it was like a doctor or something.
Well, he came across like he was a professor. He had, I think he sniffed a few too many of those markers, personally. He was like, the YouTube channel is just not making as much as it used to. It keeps the lights on. It pays the light bill. And
he was looking for any excuse he could to take your money.
Yeah, but he said, I've got these guitars I've been asked to do, but I'm just not going to be able to do it. And he did a similar thing. The thing I don't get is, so Devi Ever did this. This guy did this. Scott something or other did this too on his YouTube channel. He was one of those hate mongers.
Yeah.
He was always he was the one who said he was his way or the highway guy, and he would go other people are telling you not to do this. they're doing it wrong.
Salvage Custom went this way too.
Yeah. Anyway, they get online and they make this, whether it's in YouTube or it's on Facebook or it's on Twitter, whatever. They make this huge, 10-page thesis, better than anything they wrote for college, to go on and on about, oh, I stubbed my toe and that cost me $15 medical bills, blah, blah, blah. And then, but I'm not looking for sympathy. 25 pages down the road or whatever, but I'm not looking for sympathy. Well, if you weren't looking for sympathy, you would have said, I got some personal shit going on. I'm not going to share it. Because I'm not looking for sympathy. That would be it.
Okay. So
you know what I mean?
Here's where I came in on this whole thing.
Because nobody's reading 10 pages down to see that.
Sure. When I had this discussion with my wife, she's familiar with Devi Ever. We go way back talking about pedals, specifically Devi Ever stuff, because of it's just being, when I was growing up and looking at fuzz pedals, and she used to watch videos when I'd have them on TV. So what we came to the conclusion is some pedal builders. Now, remember, these people are not making a living doing this. Okay, the vast majority of the really small builders are not making a majority of their living doing this. Your bigger companies like your Catalan Brads, your Robert Keeley's, your Wamplers, they're probably paying the bills. Okay, now we know they are, because Wampler, for example, has mentioned like this is his only job. JHS, perfect example. They've built their companies into an empire, and they have 5 or 6 employees, good benefits, and they're taking care of everything. Now, these are often the pedal companies that people say, well, really, their pedals are really overpriced. Well, that's because they're paying wages. Okay. So to back up and look at Devi Ever's situation, I would say, and I may be wrong on this, but I would guess her sales volume is just a step above somebody like Pelican Noise Works, right? So Leon over at Pelican Noise Works. I think he actually has some friends that may help him build some of the effects. But Leon, and I have a decent relationship with him. I've talked to him via Facebook several times. I don't get the impression that he doesn't have a day job. Okay, and I think most of your small private builders, in order to pay the bills, have a day job. That's where the problem comes with Devi Ever. Devi Ever does not have a day job. So every time something goes wrong, it's either paid for out of pedal proceeds, or it's one of those things where Devi Ever knows that her situation sucks and it's not going to improve because the business is not improving. Now, my simple answer to that is, and I know people will shun me for saying this, but get a fucking job. Do like the rest of us. Look, I have guitar as my hobby. I play guitar probably just as much as I work. And the reality is, I work because I need money. I'm not going to make that money playing guitar. I understand that. So I just see it as like, okay, if you really love building pedals and you want to make a little bit of money at it, that's when you're a Devi Ever level builder. When you want to make a living at it, you have to have the business intelligence to make it work. And I'm not talking about reporting and stuff. I'm just not understanding like how you build a business model. And in all honesty, she had like 14 fuzz pedals at one point. That's not how you build a business. Okay, you build a business by capturing a large audience, and so you want to have a little bit of everything to offer that audience. And granted, you can be the niche person, but you have to be really good at it, and you have to be better than everyone else. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Devi at some point along the path was just as big as a Keeley or a Wampler of that time. But I just don't see it. I have not seen enough Devi Ever stuff in the wild to believe that. I have seen plenty of Wampler and Keeley modded stuff over the years. So that's where I stand. Main thing is watch yourself when you're making online transactions. Do a little bit of research. 5 minutes on the gear page can do a lot. Make sure that this person's on the up and up, and even then, understand that you are taking a risk, because at some point one of these people may fold, and it may come out of nowhere. In case of we were talking about Salvage Custom. They made custom pedal boards. They folded overnight, and actually business was quite good. The problem was they couldn't keep up. They couldn't make boards fast enough, and so they slowly started to get into debt because he was hiring additional people to help out, and it just became one of these things where they grew the business too fast, and they took every order that came across the table. Typically, what a builder should do, and I say this with the utmost respect, and I hope people understand this is not to be a dick move, but what a builder should do if they have that high of demand is to either build to stock, and that's all they do. We're not taking special orders. You have to get what is in stock. Or, number two, you raise prices because you have to keep the demand low. It's that simple.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Coming from the world of the manufacturing in the past, prices even as little as a penny can affect your sales.
Oh, absolutely,
Huge numbers.
absolutely.
It's crazy. I mean, I'm not so sure. I don't know the pedal world as well, but I do know the electronic world in the between cars and.
But just think about it this way, right? So, if you're a company and you have a rare product like the Ibanez Chiva, for example, when it was coming out, and you've listed it at a price that's very attractive and has generated more sales than you're planning to produce the product, what do? You raise prices because you realize demand sets the price. Okay? This is basically the same thing. But fortunately, I don't think many of us, even those of us from the manufacturing background, which I have experience in manufacturing as well, have ever been in the fortunate position to say, you know what, this is priced too low. That's why we have so much demand on it.
Yeah. All right, so other scary news.
Yeah. Well, I don't think this is as scary, but it's certainly there's a story behind it.
Yeah. So in 2000, I want to say it was 2004, Les Paul or Gibson came out with Les Paul for Jimmy Page, and it was an identical to his. I want to say it was a 58 or 59.
They've had more than that one.
Well,
they made one in mid 90s too.
Yeah, I'm just saying the most recent one.
That was the custom shop one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a custom shop edition. It was really just an R9 or an R8 with Page's approval and some cigarette burns in a few spots and such.
And the phase switching.
Yep. And they released it. It was one of those ones where, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the custom shop stuff, at least in Gibson, before it even the word gets to the street, there are certain people who gets phone calls and they're asked, are you interested? Because these collectors go at them quicker than you can spit. So a lot of times the Mark Knopfler, the Jimmy Page, the Pete Townsend, the Alex Lifeson, and so on and so forth, they're spoken for before you even get a chance to see them, even in today's electronic modern world. And back then it was a lot slower.
It basically requires a special agreement with your dealers not to have that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, long story short, these things came out. I want to say they were a $9,000 price tag or $10,000 price tag.
And they were very pricey.
But you couldn't touch one for like 16 grand or 18 grand. And then so I just recently I posted one in our group, and it went for. It's on sale now for $23,000. It would probably go for $20,000, but it's up on Reverb for about $24,000. Going along with that, so today, the Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth is aflutter with the fact that Fender is finally releasing a Telecaster,
a Jimmy Page Telecaster.
Okay, and everybody's acting like they know some piece of trivia that you've never heard of. Did you know
fucking
that
everybody knows that Jimmy Page played a lot of shit on a Telecaster. If you don't know that these days, where the fuck have you been?
Yeah, you don't know anything about Jimmy Page if you didn't know he played a freaking Telecaster with the Yardbirds and on a lot of the recordings, and almost predominantly on the first
live.
Yeah. Well, you played a Dan Electro too. I haven't seen that signature Dan Electro.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, let's face it, modern Dan Electros are nothing like those were.
No, because that was a completely different company, really.
Yeah.
It's just a name now.
Right.
But anyway, so everybody's a flutter, and it's like, so if you read the article, which most people just plastered the article and didn't even read it.
I did.
The article is quite simple. There's going to be 2 custom shop versions. And there's going to be 4 guitars. So like your box tops and your covers of Guitar World from the 90s, collect all 4.
Yep.
You know, you gotta make sure you get all the teen beats that have got, you know, Leif Garrison and
So
anyway,
get back to the line.
so they're all different colors. They're all, because it started as a blonde.
Incorrect, Jim. There's 2 different colors.
Yeah,
and they have not been revealed yet either, because it is believed one will actually have the mirror thing that he did to the guitar, and the other one will have the dragon. So nobody knows if that's the case or not.
But they might do a blonde and the dragon or the mirror. That's just it. Right now, it's all speculation.
I think the dragon is probably the one that they're going to do with the blonde, frankly, but that's me.
Yeah. 2 of them are custom shop. And I don't know. The other 2 are going to be not
production level. No, they're production level. They are production level. They said that.
Right. That's in the article. Yeah. I didn't know if I missed that because you said that. But I did know there's different colors. I'm willing to bet that the 2 that come out in production don't look anything like the custom ones maybe at the surface.
The production ones will be damaged. They will be relicked. The regular ones will not be. It's the same thing as the Gilmore one. No, it's going to be like the Gilmore thing. Look, they did the Black Strat custom shop version that was all beat to hell, and then they did the production version that was basically pristine. Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, I just don't see it. I mean, it's news. I just can't believe the buzz over a guitar that, frankly, has been 30, 40 years too late.
I don't feel that this is too late. I think this is one of those situations, though, where for people who, you know, grew up on Led Zeppelin, our depiction of Jimmy is always the pictures of him in the black pants with the moon on him, jumping up in the air and hitting the Les Paul, right? And it has a lot to do with the fact that the majority of what we know of Jimmy Page comes from Song Remains the Same. My fucking cats, man, I swear to...
No, I'm laughing my ass off because both of them are playing around with these papers.
Yeah, there's just paper here. Like, what the fuck? There's nothing on it, you dumbasses. God. You're going to have all the people on my podcast thinking I'm an animal abuser.
No, he just lets them climb all over.
I just let him do everything. It's ridiculous. It's like having 2 kids you can't tell no to.
That brown one. Which one is the little brown one? Right? No, the one next to you.
Oh, that's Michonne over here, and then that's Merle.
Yeah, Michonne is almost always in David's lap at some point.
Yeah, or on the back of the chair, standing over my shoulder. Cat. It's like a parrot.
It is. So I think that's where she wants to be right now.
And she's heavy too. She weighs like 12 pounds now or something.
There she goes.
Oh, yep, she's trying. What's attention? Anyway, so I think the people that grew up with the idea of the Les Paul as being Jimmy Page's primary guitar, this is not aimed at you anyway. This is aimed at Fender fans who want a piece of classic rock history, and I don't even think it's necessarily aimed specifically at Jimmy Page fans. I mean, let's look. In the 1970s, what guitars were dominating stages? It was all Gibson, for as like hard rock was concerned. Well, very rarely did you run into a Fender.
And if it was a Strat, not a Tele.
Yeah. So there's another component of this that people seem to miss, and that is the fact that this guitar graced a lot of hands before it ended up in Jimmy Page's.
Right. It was Jeff Beck's first,
and
right?
there was another player before that, something Orwell. I think Olson Orwell. It escapes me, but he got it from him. He played it for a couple of months or whatever in Yardbirds, and then he didn't sell it to Jimmy Page. When no, it wasn't even that, because I read the interview with Page or with Jeff Beck where he talks about it. He says when he left the Yardbirds, he was pissed and just walked out and basically left the guitar. And then Jimmy Page saw it there and just picked it up and said, "The hell with it. This is my guitar now." And then. And then almost
literally picking up the mantle.
And then like 30 years later, they had a conversation about it. And Jimmy Page gave him a very rare gypsy jazz guitar as payment for the fact that he had been using that that Telecaster for years. He still plays that Telecaster. He still has it.
He said something about they got it 110%. He got one in the.
A lot of people will tell you that Jimmy Page's primary studio guitar was that Telecaster. I don't know if that's true or not. There are certainly some songs like Rock and Roll. That's definitely some sort of Gibson. But that Telecaster's on a lot of fucking recordings from them. And I think he's still using it as a secret weapon.
Well, they say that's the one that is the Stairway to Heaven solo, right?
Yes, I believe they're probably correct on that. It's definitely Telecaster on that song, but I believe that was probably that Telecaster specifically.
Yeah, I could believe that because everybody thinks it's the the SG or Les Paul, because live he would either do it on a Les Paul or he would have the 12-string, 6-string SG.
Do you know why he preferred Les Pauls and stuff live? Think about it. Why? Humbucking pickups.
Yep, humbuckers.
And no band had a stage show as big as Led Zeppelin's at that time. So for them, maybe the Beatles or somebody like that, or Wings or whoever. For the amount of lights and craziness they had going on, you could not imagine what that would be like for noise.
Right. Well, that's why Gilmour used. Everybody talks about Gilmour's EMGs. That was a live thing. That was not a studio thing. His EMGs were because live, he needed to be able to control that guitar. We talked about that with Steve Stein yesterday, about how important it is for an active guitar. I know that when I play bass, I prefer an active bass to a passive bass any day of the week. And I know I would get pushback here and there from the bass players too. But honestly, even in a humbucker bass, I prefer an EMG for control of the sound. I could get my sound plugged into anything. I could go into a DI box, go direct. I'd still have my sound.
Yeah. So the end all story of this is, I don't particularly want the Page Telly. I will try it out if I get the chance to.
Yeah.
If it ends up being a cool guitar, maybe. But I'm in the market for Telecaster anyway. Everybody knows I've talked about it on the show. So if I try it out and I like it, that might be a Telly for me. But the reality is, I think that Telly is very basic. I think it's just a regular old Telecaster with paint on it. I don't think there's anything crazy under the hood, or I mean, it's a bone stock 59 Telecaster. So
yeah, I can't. There's been with all the stuff that all the voodoo that surrounds this Telecaster. None of it is about what somebody did to it. It's not like David Gilmour, who talks about how he had like 2 or 3 necks on his Stratocaster, or how the pickups have changed out over the years. It's not like where you talk about what's his name, ZZ Top, Billy
Gibbons and Hurley Gates
and all the stuff he's been through with his Les Pauls and stuff. It's not like that at all. It's just here's a Telecaster that came from one famous player, came to Jeff Beck, who got pissed off and walks out of a room, and now Jimmy Page had it.
My bigger, that of those two players, the guitar they really need to make a clone of is the which is gone, which is why they can't do it, is the Seymour Duncan Les Paul that was given to Jeff Beck. The one with the dual humbuckers that was used all over Blow by Blow. That guitar, to me, is legendary. It was used
that stolen?
No, he sold it.
Ooh.
That guitar is legendary to me just because it was used on Because We've Ended As Lovers.
Yeah.
And even though it's used on all over that record, and it is, just a legendary sound, I'm sure if they went to Seymour Duncan, he's got notes on what was in that guitar, and they could probably make a pretty good repro. But again, we don't have the guitar as a model. I think that's less likely to happen. But it's a cool idea, right? So anyway, moving on. It seems like there was something else I wanted to mention about that. So a lot of the mythology surrounding this guitar is questionable too. You got Jeff Beck saying that it was just taken by Jimmy Page. I don't think Jimmy Page has ever corroborated that. I think he's always said that I paid him like $150 for it or something.
Jimmy Page is such a statesman. When you see him and you see interviews with him.
He looks like George Washington now.
Yeah, he's such an elderly statesman. He's always, I mean, he came across a little bit
the gray curly
stonery.
hair thing that's down to his shoulders. Yep. I mean, all he needs is some face powder, and he's George Washington.
Yeah, he's up there, full scoring 7 years ago, which was actually Abraham Lincoln. But but I don't remember any good. I could never tell a lie. Yeah. I guess is that George Washington.
I'm sure Jimmy can tell a lie. Let me tell you.
You guys can.
Let's
tell
ask the sharks in that California hotel. Whoa! Yeah, I went there.
I never, ever did well in history. I was like, Mr. Scrapepie in history. Even in college, I was like.
Hey,
I was like, C is good enough.
Any guy that's that obsessed with Aleister Crowley, there's probably a very good chance he could lie to you. That's all I'm saying. There's our Halloween connection. Aleister Crowley, Jimmy Page, Fender Telecaster. The circle, the triangle of evil is complete.
The circle of evil. We had one other thing.
Yes, we do. So since we were talking about Devi Ever earlier in this episode, there was a conversation going on in a special secret place with some special secret people. And I have corroborated this by talking to some other special secret people. And
whose names will be unnamed.
There's a lot of people saying that the last couple of years has been extremely hard on the boutique pedal business. Now, Jim and I have kind of joked about this off and on. I think we've mentioned it on the show before that we feel that there's a boutique bubble right now. Okay.
Right.
Everybody is making something boutique, albeit a pedal, a guitar, cables now, pedal boards, all kinds of insanity. And we don't have that big a market in the guitar world, in the guitar community, to sustain this kind of behavior. And I think so. Some people have been saying so basically since Trump got in office. This is the way it's been portrayed by certain people. Since Trump got in office, the economy for buying boutique gear is in the shitter. Now,
I think that's because didn't President Trump come out and say that he was building a wall around Portland, Oregon?
He's going to issue an executive order to ban all boutique equipment coming out of Portland, Oregon.
Everything in Portland, Oregon has got like a 25% tax.
Keep it weird, Portland. That's all I can say. Keep it weird. Keep up the fort.
We're just picking on Portland because almost everything you see, I think with the exception of Keeley and Wampler, comes out of Portland when it comes to boutique pedals.
It seems very frequently that handmade boutique goods are coming out of Portland. And that doesn't even just mean pedals. How many breweries and craft beers are coming out of Portland?
Yep, there's that too.
So the dream is alive. The dream is alive in Portland for those of you who are well versed.
Don't shave your beards, guys. Don't shave your beards.
So the whole point is that I want to talk about this in the sense that this is a calamity, it's a tragedy, right? And then I want to talk about this from a realistic perspective. So if the pedal world is collapsing, what does this mean? This means that we're going to get a lot less variety in pedals, right? All
right. I'm gonna come up against that right away.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna come up right against it. I saw Andertons and Chappers put up a thing today that it was how Lee and Rob met. Really funny video, by the way, folks. And they don't do a lot of playing in it. It's more about looking back. And one of the things that they talk about in there is how right now they had an acronym. Just JATFS. Just another tube screamer. JAFTS. Jafts. And the thing is that's what you've got right now is really, I mean, I was about to say the same thing. In the boutique world, what it should be is, look, we're doing something so unique and so different and so new. We talked about this, that it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But I think that now, I don't think that the bubble is because there's so many boutique companies. I think the bubble is because I can do it too. And maybe not.
I think I personally, we're going to talk about the bubble and the cause of it. I think it's that there's only a certain amount of money to go around. And believe me, there are people, if you gave them unlimited, if they won that $1.6 billion, right? There are people out there that would buy every single Tube Screamer clone in the market. They're out there. I mean, the fact is their money is limited, and so they can't do that. Now, the question is, if
we have to live in the real world.
If you're going to the store and you need a delay, and the new Tube Screamer's out from whoever, and you're like, man, I really need this delay. Are you going to buy the Tube Screamer or the delay? I think the practical amongst us, which is probably most of us, would buy the delay because they'd say, well, I already have a Tube Screamer at home. I don't need the new one. I can wait. There are people that would go the other way and be like, you know what, I really need to dirt pedal more, and I'll just leave the delay until later. Yeah. Those are the ones that have been fostering this increased growth. And I'm making wild motions with my hands. It looks like I'm a turkey right now. Ultimately, I have a hard time believing that this is a result of there being 5,000 different Tube Screamers on the market, but I also have a hard time not believing that.
Can I interject on something else too?
Sure.
That affects the market? I don't think there's ever been a larger market as a result of the people that play 4 songs on Sunday mornings and afternoons as there is now.
Right now.
Yes. And right now. That market is starting to level off.
I think it peaked, and as people are getting more and more into using the guitar as a pad, meaning a synthesizer pad in a church setting, it's becoming less and less important for you to have every freaking pedal on your board. I remember seeing when the boutique pedal craze in churches was at its peak, and you had to have a $4,000 PRS and a $5,000 Dumble clone behind you, and a pedal board and 2 pedal boards connected together with a daisy chain. I can remember seeing crazy stuff like that going on, and sitting there going, "This is worship. You're playing 4 songs, and really your job is to play a pad." So for me, I kind of look at that situation and go, this is people coming to their senses. Now, does this mean the middle class is shrinking? Who knows? I'm not going to get into the technical nitty-gritty of the economy. But what I will say is this. The pedal companies are actually feeling this, and that's why they're talking about it. And it's not just pedal companies. It's guitar companies, too. There's boutique guitar manufacturers, boutique cable builders, boutique basically anybody who is a small shop, like less than 3 people, is feeling this
boutique
really
amp
bad.
builders. When you think about it, when you think about your numbers per guitar player, let's just say per guitar player, you've got more pedals than guitars, more guitars than amps, and more your cables may vary. But I'm just saying that some people will have 1, maybe 2 amps, and like a gigging amp, a practice amp, maybe a second, like a lunchbox amp for mobility. Even the pros, and then you've got and even the pros that have got multiple amps on stage. Those are the ones they do on stage, but they don't. That's not what they mic up at home. Another. Oh, you know what? I just saw this because I was watching Rick Beato, and I thought about this. So there has never been so many home studios either. And what
Correct.
do home studios buy? They buy pedals and they buy heads, not necessarily cabinets.
No, yeah.
But heads, right? So again, we've got a bubble that has that market saturated to a point where
I'm done playing Satan's advocate. I'm going to tell you what I think is really happening, and you can tell me whether you agree with me or not. I think what's happening is, so in the beginning of this boutique pedal craze, the big companies, your Digitex, your Bosses, your Rolands, your insert other major companies here, Marshall, Fender, Gibson, they all didn't know what the fuck to do. They're looking at this and going, these people are more agile than us, so they can put out different designs faster and more cheaply. And they can vary it up and make things cool and fresh for the moment, right? So if you look at your average under 30 guitar player right now, they're pretty hipster. I'm not saying they are hipsters. What I am saying is that they are more in tune with what's going on at any given moment. And so for them, they have to have the new, unique, weird design that's coming out from somebody. That's why they're not as concerned with the brand label on the headstock. So Fender has done a really good job of the last 3 years of appealing to that market by doing things like the Time Machine series. It's not my cup of tea, but I know a lot of people who lost their fucking minds when they saw those things. Other examples are like that Squire 51 Telly and some different things that they've done that were clearly aimed at the modding community. And they took note. They realized their pickups weren't good enough because everybody was replacing with Lawlers and all the other smaller boutique brands. So they started including custom shop pickups in a lot of their guitars. They started making custom shop pickups available for sale. They revamped their noiseless pickup line. They finally started producing a decent fucking humbucker out of Fender. That was amazing. I don't think Gibson weathered the storm as well. I think they've kind of just now started to pull themselves together a little bit. And I think we're starting to see a resurgence in people interested in Gibson designs that aren't necessarily the guys that wanted them, 10 years ago. And I think, like Boss, they just got their sea legs. Okay. If you look at some of the effects things that they put out in the last 3 years, I mean, really the ES5 and the ES8, those switching systems, who are you appealing to? Not most pros have 5 or 6 pedals on their board at max. And an ES8 is really not all that necessary for them. But for the guys that play in church and they got 20 pedals on a pedal train Terra, I mean, yeah, that's what you want. You want an ES8. You want a switching system that's capable of MIDI programming and all that craziness. Some pros do use that stuff, but I think that's a little less likely than people like to make out. The pros that really need that kind of a heavy switching system, a lot of them are still going to Bradshaw and other companies. To
Cornish.
Yep. Yeah, or even now the gig rig has become extremely popular for that.
Yep.
And that's not saying that everybody's doing it. I mean, obviously you've got your smaller people, like, I don't want to say smaller, but like Guthrie Govan still uses the gig rig. I mean, he's not having a Bradshaw rig. But remember, these guys have got to remain flexible too. And so in a lot of cases, if you're Steve Vai, you're touring as Steve Vai, right? You're not touring with Toto and everybody else and have to have a new board every time you go out. So those kind of systems work well for those people. The other thing that Boss did was they started introducing the Waza line, which is basically boutique versions of their most popular pedals. And by popular, they even started digging back into their back catalog. You know about Waza. We've talked about it on the show before. If you haven't, roll back a few episodes. You'll hear me go on and on about the Metal Zone. The whole thing that I see going on there is that these companies, these major companies, are now playing the boutique game. And they're doing it at a compelling price point in most cases. Which means if you're sitting there and you're looking at Private Builder A, and you go, Private Builder A, if I buy this guitar from him, I'm going to have next to no resale value based on what I put in. If I spend $3,000 on Private Builder A's guitar, when I sell it, I'm going to get $1,000 for it. Whereas if I spend $3,000 on a Fender custom shop, some relic thing that's appealing to my sensibilities right now, I'm going to be able to sell that thing for $2,500 or $2,400. And so for them, like, that's a much better value proposition. Also, looking at Boss pedals, you might lose value on them, but they're Boss pedals. You know that they're going to work. Most people, I think, still have a pretty positive impression of Boss. And there are other companies out there that you can buy that are name brand boutique now. I mean, Wampler is what I would consider name brand boutique. Cattle and Bread is name brand boutique.
Keeley.
Voodoo Lab, Keeley. All of these companies produce a large number of pedals and have a good backing behind them.
I would argue that JHS has got
JHS is exactly the same thing. He would now be, his pedal company would now be in line with that. So my point is that we've seen, and actually it's funny to see the boutique guys actually competing with boutique guys, but being like the evil empire, right? To think about Keeley actually like subjugating people like, I hate to use this as an example we were talking about earlier, Devi Never's company, for example. It's interesting to think about it from that perspective, that we now have come full circle and we have these brands that are now risen to the top. And I think we're still going to continue to see that. I think there are certain brands that will continue to rise up and it won't necessarily be relegated to the trash bin of history. I think a perfect example of that, and Jim can shoot me if he likes, is Chase Bliss, because they do offer a unique product. I think
I've never had anything from Chase Bliss.
I think the uniqueness says a lot about how you're going to stay in this world. And companies that don't provide something unique, they go the way of the dinosaur. Case in point, I'm trying to think about. So we look back at somebody like Love Pedal. Love Pedal was huge for a while, and now Love Pedal is like it's been relegated basically to a much smaller company. I think they actually Either they got sold or they have partnered with somebody else or something along the way. I'm not really clear on what happened there, but my point is that these companies that were basically just modifying tube screamers and then selling it as their own product, a lot of them are starting to disappear. And I don't know that that's a bad thing for the market. I think that requires builders to become more ingenious to be successful. And I think that's okay. I don't see any problem with somebody having to actually like put some real design effort forward in order to start producing a quality product, in order to produce sales. That's where I'm coming from. I've seen this going on, and it's very clear to me that the trend is mainstream boutique. In other words, what can you do to compete with the small builders who you didn't think you could compete with 5 years ago? And these companies have retooled, and they're thinking about things in a very different way than they used to. It's a shame that this company is being kind of mismanaged the way it is right now. But DoD Digitech, Harman Kardon, that is Harman Kardon? No. You know what I'm talking about, though. The Harman Audio, whatever. The company that actually owns Digitech DoD. They were bought by Samsung. Samsung is gutting the company. You can see what's happening there. It's kind of a shame. I'm not a big Digitech fan. I've only ever had one Digitech pedal I liked, and that was a Supernatural Reverb, which is a great pedal, by the way. But to look at their product line and see how they revamped it, they discontinued the Supernatural, and then they made all these very boutique-looking enclosures, like the Dirty Robot, the Nautilus Chorus.
Yep.
That's who they were appealing to, and it was very obvious that that's who they were appealing to. I remember going into a Guitar Center about 10 years ago and saying, what do you guys got in the way of boutique pedals? It was in Madison, Wisconsin, of all places, so they just looked at me like I was fucking insane. But they go, well, we got Digitech hardware, and I was like, really?
I know, right?
So honestly, though, if you'd said that to me now with the Digitech line that they are discontinuing or like getting or at least sorting through or whatever they're doing, I would kind of laugh and go, yeah, those are kind of more boutique aim, but they're really not boutique pedals. Like, I get it. Now I don't care if it's boutique or not. Like, I'll go into a store and be like, where's your overdrive? So I'll be like, just give me that SD1. But I'm now starting to understand, just based on seeing what people are buying when I go into the store. They're not buying this stuff anymore. And you know what? I know the pedal builders don't want to admit it, but if the economy is slightly better, people are buying amps over pedals again. Or guitars. And there's a marked shift there. People buy pedals when the market sucks. And I know people don't want to admit that, but I've actually heard people say that to me from pedal builders who have said that to me and other people in forums. When the economy is in the crapper, it's a lot easier to fork over $170 for a pedal than it is $500 or $1,000 for an amp.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, other than space, obviously, one of the biggest reasons that pedals sell over amps. They're cheaper. And it's easier to turn them.
So now, when you look at the situation, you go, if the economy's starting to perk up a little bit, would you rather have an amp or a pedal? And you know what? Honestly, like, I used to be the guy that was like, I think pedals are really cool. I'd rather have a couple pedals. But now I'm starting to be like, you know what? Fuck pedals. Like, they don't give me enough return on my investment. Meaning, I don't feel like I have the relationship with them I do with either a guitar or an amp. And so, in most cases, I'm going to choose a guitar or an amp. It's going to cost me a lot more money, but at the end of the day, I'll end up more satisfied. And long term, if I do have to sell a guitar, I feel like I'm going to get more out of it than I will a pedal. Your mileage may vary, but the point is, in dealing with our Halloween theme here, if the boutique market is ending, what does that mean for you? Sound off in the group. Let us know what you think. I personally, I don't think it's going to affect me much.
Doesn't affect me.
Although I will say this, if we see some of the smaller boutique like guitar companies go out of business, that's going to affect the smaller guys like Schecter, LTD ESP, companies that are kind of on the fringe, like G&L would be one of them, I suppose. And I get concerned that some of the guitars that I like will dry up. You won't be able to find them. Maybe not that they're not produced, but that you won't be able to find them. And that becomes concerning to me. I also get concerned that mom and pops who have made stock and trade and selling boutique stuff, if boutique stuff starts to go the way of the dinosaur, going to be harder for them to keep the doors open. It's bad for business.
Well, I mean, I think we could do a whole episode on the fact that, as much as I'm not crazy about buying stuff sight unseen, I have bought pedals. Obviously, I bought almost all my pedals.
Pedals are a lot easier to make that investment in sight unseen.
That's right,
aren't they?
And my amp was sight unseen. My newest amp was sight unseen. So I think that when it comes to something like that, we're seeing a large Sweetwater. Obviously, is probably one of the most popular, if not the biggest, online retailer.
I think I remember seeing somewhere recently that they are the biggest online retailer now.
Yeah,
at least in the States.
Right. And so and with the advent of things like Harley Benton, and more companies doing more things online and giving them, look at how many things Sweetwater's got versions that are Sweetwater exclusive.
Yep. Yep.
So I think we're going to see more of that down the line. Certainly, it's easier on a Brian Wampler because Sweetwater's only going to need a minimal number of pedals until their stock is going to be more just in time than something like a Guitar Center that needs to put them in stores.
And those guys, specifically like your Keeleys and your Wamplers, have been through this already. Okay,
right.
Most people don't realize this, but there was a downturn in the boutique pedal market like 2007, 2008 that was horrendous. And I think that's when it was, 2007, 2008. Sounds right. Where a lot of really small builders just went kaput. And it was just because of a change in the economy and a change in the way people were, perceiving the market. So they weren't buying. The other thing is, we talked about market saturation. This is probably also having a small effect on it. A service like Reverb, where you could just go buy your pedals used, and you can pretty much find anything you want to look for, is certainly impacting these builders' bottom line. If there only needs to be 200 copies of your pedal out there, I mean, honestly, then that's going to stay at 200 because people are just going to buy and trade them on Reverb. And there's so many guys, and I'm not pointing the finger at anybody in particular, but some other podcasts do this, where they don't really fall in love with a pedal. They use it for a couple of weeks and they get bored with it, and then they sell it and get another one. And that's fine. Like, I totally understand that. But that's also having an effect on the marketplace. And there are more and more people doing that, especially with the rise of guitar media like YouTube and podcasts and all these things that people are talking about that. So just, bear that in mind. If you're wanting to try a pedal out, buy used. Don't buy it new. It's not necessarily a bad thing for some of these businesses to collapse. I know it's a terrible personal situation, but in terms of the state of products and products getting better, you want to kind of level the playing field every once in a while, and you do that by separating the men from the boys. I guess that's a terribly sexist way of saying it, but it's Thunderdome out there. 2 tube screamers enter, 1 tube screamer leave, and that's the way this is going to work. And so we're going to whittle the market down. I
guess the PC way of saying that is separating the adults from the children.
Yes.
I'd also like to say that. So I was watching an interview with a bunch of YouTubers. GitCon was recently posted on YouTube, of course.
Sure.
And I'm not a great big fan of GitCon, but I do like to watch some of the stuff that came out of it. And one of the interesting interviews was that Phil X was talking about his rig. They asked a bunch of the folks on there, and the club guy, I think he's called Gearman Dude, was on there, and he referred to how he's got to keep his, like most of us, he's got to be relatively compact for clubs. And he was talking about, the musicians he keeps up with. Well, then the guy that's backing up, who's the lead singer that used to be with Operation Mindcrime, Queensryche?
Jeff Tate.
So Jeff Tate's
I like to call him Jeff
player,
Tated.
Yes, Jeff Tated. No, Jeff Tated. Anyway, Jeff Tate's he's got his band now is called Operation Mindcrime.
Yes, I've been listening to Queensryche the last couple of days, so to hear this. I will have to talk about Jeff Tate when we get done with this.
Well, anyway, so Jeff Tate's guitar player is on there, and he was talking about how he's playing through a Kemper. It's all modeled, no amps anywhere, and in-ears. That's it. That's all you get. No wedges, no nothing. And that's because, I mean, let's face it, Jeff Tate is playing clubs now. He's not playing huge places.
Yeah.
And so then they got to Phil X, who was the only person on the panel that's playing.
Yeah, like big stadiums and
he's Bon Jovi. He replaced,
or at least he was. I don't know if he's still doing it or not. But
he is.
Okay,
and that's what he was referring to. So he was talking about how he will not give up his amp for anything, and he will not go to that state.
Yeah,
and
we'll see when that starts costing him gigs how that works out.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, he's a full-on member of. He's not a hired gun for Bon Jovi anymore. He's been a full-on member.
Yeah,
for
and
years.
so is Richie Sambora.
Yeah, I know he got fired too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that. So Phil X is, he was talking about how he found a certain spot on the stage recently, and he wants to find it again when they go to Japan and that's where he can stand. Because really, his amps. Even though he's the guy that I said was the big holdout, guess where his amps are?
Under the stage.
Under the stage. He had to find one spot on the stage. He was like, I was standing in this one spot and I was able to get feedback. He goes, finally. And he goes, so I'm going to have them mark the stage because, they build and tear down the stages, right? So he said, I'm going to mark the stage exactly where it is, so that where my amp is, exactly where it is, so that he can reproduce that. So if he needs to go there and get that again, he can. That's how bad it is. But what I'm getting at here, because it does come back to that pedal thing and the whole amp thing, you own what will be. I have no doubt, and I know Wampler was talking about this. I have no doubt that the future of pedals is going to be you'll have something like an Amp One. And you'll have something like your Line 6 Helix.
This isn't the future.
That is it.
It's here already.
Well, I'm just saying that it won't be too long, and the old guys will be playing them.
Can I talk about the dinosaur that I saw the other night? Okay, so I went. I had the lovely pleasure of seeing a certain Mr. Yngwie Malmsteen at the local club where I also got to see Buckethead.
Okay.
Now, you've seen Buckethead. He still uses cabs on stage. His stage volume is still pretty quiet, relatively.
Yep.
Yngwie Malmsteen, forget it, okay? I am so glad I brought my earplugs. He has, of course, if anybody's seen it, he has the Great Wall of Malmsteen, which is this giant wall of Marshalls that's on stage. There are two man-made objects that you can see from space. One is the Great Wall of China. The other is Yngwie's Wall of Marshalls. And I'm not joking. Like, it is. I posted video in the group. I posted additional video on my own Facebook page. You see that thing, and it is a sight to behold. There was a time when that was the norm in the 1970s, where they might actually be using all the cabs. Now, Yngwie did not use all the cabs. I will say this right now. He had 4 heads going, 2 on each side of the stage, and I know because I watched him adjust them. And then he also had 4 cabs going. So basically what he had was 4 half stacks. Granted, these are 100-watt plexi heads, and they don't make them like that anymore. Those motherfuckers were loud. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
To the point where I'm not sure I was hearing much out of the PA from his guitar. And the way he was positioned on stage, he pretty much took up the entire stage. Now, rightfully so. I mean, the guy's doing guitar tosses and running around like a maniac. I don't know how he does it, because he's got to be at least 60 years old at this point. He has to be a model of health. Anyway, other than whatever substance abuse that he was under during the 80s. I will say this. I took my earplugs out for 2 songs. It hurt, but it was the most glorious sound I have ever heard in my life. And I totally understand somebody like Phil X saying, I want amps on stage. However, with guitar becoming the less dominant part of music as we go forward, and that's the state of the affairs right now, folks, we don't have as much clout as we used to, and especially not on pop stages. I know Bon Jovi is kind of a pop rock stage, and so he can get away with it.
and he's more guitar rock. And when you think about it, the new Greta Van Fleet, that is more guitar rock.
Hopefully we see more of that. I would hope, just for the guitar players'
I
sake.
would love to.
And even they are sensible, though. They're not going around with eight Marshalls.
Yeah, well, that's why I posted that. Yeah, that gig rundown.
I can definitely see the stages being quieter. I think we're going to see more things like ISO boxes before we see the hey, we're just going to use a pedal revolution. I think we're right there. I just don't think we're quite there yet. I would like to see good ISO boxes. I think that would be a very, very cool thing to happen. Like if you could buy a road case that was also an ISO box and had an XLR out on it. Somebody make this, I'll buy one. That'll fit, a standard 1x12 cab or whatever, and then you could use that. And you could take that into a bar and you could crank your amp up and still have a virtually silent stage, like much quieter than you would normally have. I think we're moving towards that. And I could definitely see there's still being some issues like feedback generation, those kinds of things. But how often do you script into what you're doing feedback? I mean, yes, I know there are times where I do it, but I'm usually hitting the harmonic, and that'll sustain forever if the amp's loud enough. If you're getting enough volume, and even out of a wedge, I mean, they'll sustain. It's when you want to get that natural feedback thing where a note, like you just regularly play, sustains into feedback. That's a rarity. You can't really build a set around it. And even if you do have the cabs coming up underneath the stage in the right way and you have it marked off the next, it's got a lot to do with room acoustics, I would suspect, as well. And I've tried to do that before, too, where I knew that, 6 feet in front of my amp, if I'm standing here and I kind of move over a little bit, I can get my guitar to sustain that way. It doesn't work in all environments, at least in not my estimation. It's one of those things where you have to be aware of the acoustics of the room and make that happen. So, yes, Phil X can use that as an excuse to have amps. His excuse is purely that he likes amps, and that's okay. That's really not.
Oh, he admitted that. He admitted that his excuse is that he loves amps, and he can
get away with it now. But that's what I take issue with.
But that's because John Bon Jovi has the money. They've got the money.
If John Bon Jovi showed up tomorrow and said we're going silent stage, Phil X would fucking do it.
Oh, of course he would.
He can pretend like he wouldn't all day long, but he would because he wants the money.
Oh yeah, you don't think that he wants to go back to doing YouTube videos, do you? What's that? You're muted.
He can do the whole rock star thing all he wants.
Yes.
But that does not necessarily mean that he's being truthful, and that's why I don't like Phil X. I've noticed him saying things like that are really cocky. It's like, well, I don't have to do this because I'm doing this now. And listen, dude, you're just like everybody else. Pete Thorne is a more successful gigging guitarist than you and has done gigs like yours before. And I'll tell you right now, Pete Thorne will tell you, if you want to get that gig, what do? You say yes. You don't sit there and act like you're above it. Pete Thorne was the guy in charge, by the way. Yeah.
And he kind of was giving him that. It was pretty funny. It's a good, again, I'm not crazy about that whole thing, but the whole GitCon thing. I actually think this year was kind of floppy.
All right, let me talk about Jeff Tate for a minute before we're out.
Yes,
because we're an hour and 21. Won't take me long to talk about Jeff Tate.
Wait, Ingwe is only 1 year older than me, by the way. 1 year and 1 month. He's 13 months older than I am.
How many more hours do you think he woodshedded than you?
I know. Probably about 5 or 6 more hours than me.
500 or 600 more, or 500, 600,000 more hours. I'm a firm believer that Ingve probably played guitar in the fucking shower.
When I was 19, he was the lead of Alcatraz. Okay.
Yeah. We'll put that one in perspective. I was still trying
to figure out what the fuck he was
doing. He was taking some sort of narcotic to be able to stay up and play that many hours at Woodshed.
But he's been married to the same woman since 1999.
Yes, and that first Amber Dawn, that first wife, I have heard some horror stories about that situation. Yeah. Read up, listeners. I'm not going to get on the gossip train for this one. You can go read up on that. So we are going to talk about Jeff Tate for a minute, though. So if you're not aware, there's a little band called Queensryche. And Queensryche was, my understanding, is pretty popular with a certain group of people in the early 90s. when they came out with Operation Mindcrime, and then the album that had Silent Lucidity on it, and the name escapes me right now.
Yeah, it was Operation Mindcrime 2. I can't remember.
No. Operation Mind. We're getting there. I'm going to specifically target that album. Okay.
No, I was just joking.
I'm a big fan of Operation Mindcrime. I think it's one of the greatest albums of the era that it was produced in. It is certainly one of the top 10 concept albums of all time, and is probably one of my picks for top 10 albums of all time. It's got a little something for everybody. It takes the rock and roll excess of the 1980s hair metal scene and turns it on its head by mixing it with elements of Pink Floyd and some subtle progressive elements outside of Pink Floyd to produce a record that talks about societal ills at that time. They take shots at the clergy scandals of the 80s. That's what I'm going to call them. They take shots at the media. They take shots at the government that does not represent us, which I think we're seeing more and more evidence that this has come to fruition. A lot of the things that they were kind of saying there, which hadn't quite happened yet, are now happening to us right now. I mean, when we have a president that basically comes out and says, I don't need to pay attention to the Constitution. I'll just do whatever the fuck I want. Yeah, that's a clear indicator that some of the themes from that record are hold true today. Silent Lucidity.
Of course.
Silent Lucidity is a great pop tune. There's other good songs on that record. It's been a while since I've listened to it, so I can't name them by name. I would highly recommend you get both of those and check them out. Now, here's where the hilariousness happens. Jeff Tate has I say had because it's past tense, one of the greatest voices in late 80s, early 90s rock / metal music. Okay. He had the pipes. He had like a 4-octave range, and was capable of doing everything from the greatest of power ballads all the way up to the screaming high metal stuff that you'd find all over that kind of music. He had a tremendous gift, and it's displayed very well on both of those records. And then he threw it away. And the reason I say this is because drugs and alcohol and probably mostly cigarettes ruined his ability to sing. And it's pretty clear. You go to any of the later albums, and he almost takes on the sound of Don Donegan of Disturbed. And there are places where he's rapping because it's pretty clear that he doesn't have the range to actually carry the tune the way he wants to. It feels painful to listen to. And a perfect example of that is Operation Mindcrime 2, which I'm going to get to that too because I think there's some thematic problems there. So Operation Mindcrime, the original record, had a very concise focus, and it was almost sarcastic, and it had a good plot. And then all of a sudden they turned the plot on its head because it ended. Okay, it had a clear end, and then when they made up the next one, it destroys the ending of the original, and so therefore makes the original useless. And so if you're going to do that, that's fine, but you better make the second offering better than the original, and it's not. It's not even close to as good as the original. There's nothing memorable on that album. And so, for me, that was like a big fuck you to their fans when they couldn't even see past the fact that going back to do a sequel to Operation Mindcrime was a mistake. They should have looked for a spiritual successor. That's what they should have done. It's almost like what the Knack did on their second record. They made My Sharona, and then they made a carbon copy record. They made a carbon copy.
They had Mine Sharona. They had Good Girls Don't. Yes. They had the whole thing, and then they got lazy. Well, they got stoned, drunk, and lazy.
Yeah. So here's where things get crazy. So Jeff Tate has a string of shitty albums with Queensryche. And Queensryche finally says, fuck you, we've had enough. And they fire Jeff Tate. Or Jeff Tate leaves, depending on which side of the story you believe.
Right.
Okay. Jeff Tate says, I am Queensryche, and says, I'll just hire all new members and tour as Queensryche. And I don't know if there was some dissension there, and like he thought Queensryche was breaking up or something like that. So then Queensryche is also touring as Queensryche. So for like a good year, there were two Queensryches. one featuring Jeff Tate and one featuring a new singer.
And they both had the name.
They both had the same name. Yeah. And then they sued each other for control of the name. And then the judge said, I'm not going to rule on this right away. So it took 3 more, it's like 2 or 3 more years before he finally said, Jeff Tate, you have to change the fucking name of your band. You are not Queensryche. Okay?
Yeah.
So then he does, and he changes it. And this is mind-boggling to me. He changes the band's name from Queensryche to Operation Mindcrime.
Yep.
So he names him after their best record, the one that everybody knows from them.
That way, if anybody's searching for Operation Mindcrime, because when people look for the band Queensryche, that's one of the first things they go to.
Well, let me tell you something. If you're going to go to an Operation Mindcrime show and expect him to perform stuff off of Operation Mindcrime, you're going to be sorely mistaken. Because he can't sing it anymore. He just can't. Nope. There's no fucking way. Look, I'm the first person to come to Axl Rose's defense when people say Axl Rose can't sing anymore. It's a bunch of bullshit. If you say that, you didn't see him in the 80s because that's how he's always sang. Just get used to it. And so for them to, this is a whole different situation, is where I'm going with this, is that Jeff Tate literally ruined his voice. This is a horror story, okay? Jeff Tate ruined his voice and really can't perform that music anymore. And if he does, it's a pale imitation. And so, to an extent, he either needs to find a new place, new career in music, or get out. And unfortunately, man, like, you need an opera coach or something to get you back where you were, and you need to stop smoking and doing any other drugs that you're doing that are causing your difficulties. And hopefully, maybe with some vocal surgery and working with a coach, you can get back to where you were. But I don't perceive that happening with him. I mean, I just don't.
No, we talked about that. The voice is an instrument, and it's based on a lot of things, not the least of which is control of your air and your facial mask. And when you've destroyed it, I just learned this about, I knew that Freddie Mercury had something weird with his overbite. Yep. I did not realize it was because he had 4 extra teeth.
That's correct.
So the reason that his overbite was so huge, he had these 4 extra teeth, and it made him look really weird. I didn't meet him, but I did see him in the
he was considering having those removed at one point.
Yeah, but he said he wouldn't because he didn't know what it would right due to his voice. So it doesn't make any sense in the world to think that you can just sit there and destroy your voice over and over and over and then expect, okay, you know what, I'm just going to get it back. It doesn't happen. Your voice, unfortunately, your vocal cords are like a set of strings, and you've only got one. And you break them, you break them. Look at what's her face, Mariah Carey.
Well, I'm operating under the assumption that he was not classically trained to begin with. Yeah. So he may have some spare fuel in the tank. And it's like one of those things where hey, if you go, they told Tom Jones this. Tom Jones, when he was getting started, was like, I really want to be able to extend my range and go really crazy with it. So he went and he saw an opera coach, and the opera coach told him, she said, I can extend your range a full octave, both directions. But she said, if I do that, you're not going to sing like you anymore. And she's like, so you need to weigh your options. And he actually didn't go through with it because he began to understand, like, the style in which I'm working is not necessarily one that requires a 4 or 5 octave range. And so he didn't do it. And Jeff Tate's case, if you could extend his range an octave one way or the other, I mean, that would be incredible. I don't think that could happen now. I think he's damaged his voice too much. However, he might be able to get back to where he was with a coach. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a sad story. It sucks. And anytime I hear anything from Jeff Tate and his band, I just kind of like facepalm because I'm like, this band shouldn't even exist. And in reality, Jeff Tate himself shot himself in the foot when he decided he was going to tour as Queensryche. It's basically a big fuck you to the fans, and it's a big fuck you to the other band, which means that if you ever wanted any hope of reuniting with those guys for like a reunion tour or an Operation Mindcrime anniversary tour, that's never going to happen now. So, I don't know. Like, what?
I think either one of them would come back enough if there was enough money in it.
Oh, sure, but I don't think the money exists for that. I don't think that's one of those ones where somebody's gonna say, "I'll pay you $1 billion to tour this." I don't think that would ever happen for that man. So that's what I'm saying. Like realistically, I think he probably just shot himself in the foot.
Right. The iron has been hot for the 90s. People
90s,
looking for
90s nostalgia.
Right, that nostalgia, which I have to laugh when I think of 90s nostalgia. Somebody in his 50s laughs when he hears somebody.
Yeah, because you're like that was just like yesterday.
I
can remember telling them to get off my lawn.
Yeah, wasn't it just last week I was telling you 90s kids to get off my lawn, and now you're back.
You
get
want
off my damn lawn.
the Korn's got the nostalgia tour coming up. Like Jim, how you feel about that?
Yeah, it's just hard for me to even fathom that my music is not really. I see so many bands, they're walking around. It's like we play classic rock. No, you do realize that. Remember when we were listening to that in the 70s and 80s, and it was the 50s? We called it oldies. Guess what 70s is now, guys?
Yeah, guys, it's oldies. My 90s nostalgia. And the funny thing is, I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s. My 90s nostalgia is like Queensryche and like bands from the late 80s, like Queensryche, Guns N' Roses, and there was another band I was thinking of too. But it's like Winger. It was like hair metal. It was like hair metal stuff. And nobody else from the 90s cares about any of that shit. Like they're looking at like your Korn and stuff like that. Well, Korn is really early 2000s.
Well, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains.
Yeah, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, bands like that.
Nine Inch Nails.
How can we forget fucking Nirvana? Oh gosh, don't get me started.
Well, they're not going on tour.
Foo Fighters,
9 Inch Nails. Those of you who love Nirvana, you'll just love what we're gonna talk about.
You mean Nirvana's out
later.
on the? You mean 9 Inch Nails is out on the road, like subjugating their band members again? Himself. Trent Reznor. Well, no, Trent Reznor hires a bunch of band members to go out with him, and then he pays them like nothing and makes them sleep in like the floor of the bus and shit. He's a dick. Yep. It's just pretty well documented at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
The guy in Filter, the one that was like paying people like $200 a night or whatever, the dude in Filter he learned that from Trent Reznor.
Really?
Yes. He was Trent Reznor's like guitar player or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So he's like, fuck it. No, I'm gonna do the same thing to other people. This is why the world sucks. Because nobody says, I'm gonna be better than that guy. They say, you know what, he's rich, I'm gonna do exactly what he does. What the hell is wrong with people? I see the guy from Filter, I'm gonna punch him right in his fucking mouth. Here's my $200 a night, you son of a bitch. Anyway, so it's been an hour and 36 minutes. You got
if I was those guys, I'd be starting a cover band and tell them to piss up a rope. But hey,
he's had people quit on stage before. Literally turn around to him and be like, "I quit."
I'd probably quit before I ever got to the stage.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. I mean, I'm just not. It's great to have a gig where you're going to get $200 a night.
Dude, you can't even pay for a hotel for that. So he's like basically making you live on the bus. When he gets a nice fucking hotel, that was what was pissing people off. He'd get like a suite somewhere and stop every night and go and take a shower, and like they haven't showered in like 3 days. It's just disgusting. That's awful, and that's a terrible way to treat people, especially people that you rely on to do your thing. Like Trent Reznor, I'm sorry, but if you want to perform and you want to treat people like that, then just plan on performing alone. Let's see how you carry a show by yourself, you dumbass.
Why doesn't he just, play the tracks at that point?
Well, I'm not sure he's still doing it because I know people like Adrian Bellew who have toured with him recently. And Adrian Bellew would not put up with that shit.
No,
because he's a draw in and of himself. Yep. So he doesn't need any of that fucking garbage.
No. Well, we've been going on for at least an hour and a half now.
No, yeah, we're at an hour 37. The power of Christ compels you. Stay safe on Halloween. Count your candy. Make sure you don't have any pins and needles in there. No explosive devices, guns, poison. Yep.
Make sure there's no bombs. I know we're joking around about that stuff.
I'm not really joking about it.
You know why? Because
I actually am genuinely afraid that shit like that will happen. I'm not joking at all. Jim, do I have a smile on my face right now? No.
I put a picture of you on the group that has a smile on your face. So that's too bad. Now everybody knows what you look like when you smile.
You're a
I did.
fucking
I
asshat.
screenshotted you when Michonne was in front of him. You're welcome. Happy Halloween.
You sent the screenshot of my middle finger, you son of a bitch. All right. I have been David. That's been a jackass, and we have been the Practical Guitarists.